Okay, so today is week 13, day 3. And up until this point, I guess this week, y'all have been introduced to the Django REST framework, where we are building our own API endpoints through Django here. And it looks like you've done some URLs and some views to connect up with your models so that you are able to hit these specific URLs, pathways, and retrieve JSON information from your database. So today we're going to look at, instead of writing our own API endpoints, we are going to go back to using somebody else's API endpoint. And we've been doing that up till this point, until we learned how to use Django to write our own. We've been just going to random APIs across the internet and just using fetch in our JavaScript to pull that information in. And today, let's see, I'm going to bring up the README on this screen. We're going to be following pretty closely with the README today, and just kind of go through how to tie in third-party APIs into our projects. So right off the bat, we can see we are going to be using our APIs from the backend. This is standard practice because a lot of times APIs can't be used easily in the front end like we did in the past weeks. A lot of times you're going to have security keys, secret keys that you need to use authentication to send to your API and receive back information. So if we put that on our front end, anybody could just, right click, inspect, and see all of that within our front end. We don't want to do that. We want to keep that secret. So we're going to put that in our back end. So when somebody clicks a button to, get all students from page, it will send the request through that front end to our back end, and then the back end will take that request, send it to our third-party API. The API is going to return the information back to our back end, and we will serve it up to the front end. Okay, so one of the reasons, here we go, you can read this whole big blurb on why we're using the backend to handle our API calls. Again, most of the reason is secret management. We don't want these API keys out there for everybody to take and steal our credentials. Another thing is this same origin policy and lack of cross-origin resource sharing. You can go ahead and learn more about that here. Not going to spend too much time on that. But all this to say, we want to start handling third-party APIs in our backend, in our Django. And then when we move on to React, we will not have any API calls in the front end for our third-party APIs. Okay, so in order to get an idea of how these work, we're going to just start putting in an API call into a Django project. And it says we'll build one, but for time's sake, I'm just going to use our Pokemon project that we've been working on, and we'll kind of go through the example here. So first things first, we need to install requests. So in JavaScript, we used fetch. Requests is the equivalent for Django and Python. So it's a library that we're going to use to help make these API calls for us. So the first thing we're going to do, well, I opened up a project that's, if you started your own project, you'd start by making your virtual environment and doing all your installs and stuff like that. But I'm opening one up that's already exists. You can see, since I've been working in this before, I do have a virtual environment, so I'm going to make sure to get in that, because I do not want to install anything to my computer. I want it within this virtual environment instead. First, make sure I'm in the right spot. Okay, so we are going to do our source and activate. Okay, see, I'm in my virtual environment and it's not giving me any troubles today, thankfully. No double virtual environment. That one worked itself out. I don't know what happened. Like killing the terminal a few times eventually got it to drop off. So who knows? Okay, so I'm in my virtual environment. And like I said, we need to get this requests library to be able to do any sort of fetching or, API calls. So we're going to pip install requests. Okay, I've already installed it because I did this the other day to make sure everything was working. So mine says I've already got it. Good deal. Next up, you want to follow it with the pip install requests. And we're going to use the OAuth library. Okay, already says I have that too. So awesome. Have everything I need to start making some API calls. We are going to just put in a new file. I only place to call it Scratch. Okay. Where we're just going to play around with making this third-party API request. So first thing we want to do when we have a library that's helping us out is we need to import it. So we're going to import requests. And then from requests, OAuth library, we're going to import this OAuth 1. Okay. So this will give us the library we need to work on our request. So, before we even get into making API calls, I forgot we need to actually find an API we're going to use. So today, we are going to use something called the Noun Project, and it says to open up this API documentation to kind of get familiar with it. So here is, I'm sorry, it's so bright. Here is the API that we are going to be working with today. So every API will have documentation. Usually it will have kind of a quick getting started, how to use this sort of thing. You're going to need to look through it to see if there's any requirements to using it, which we can see right now. It looks like we need an API key. And if we read it, let's see, it looks like everyone can get one, even playground accounts, which are usually like free accounts. And once you've logged in, you go to this page to generate a new API key or manage existing ones. Okay. And we got to keep it secret. So let's see. I already signed up for this and signed in. If you do this on your own, which you're going to have to if you want to follow along with today's lecture with the Pokemon project, you will sign up for this site and then you will have create an app in the screen here. And you'll have to click that and name your application whatever you want, tell it what it does, and then generate your key. So I already did it. I did a test app. And we're going to show you all how to use this third-party API in Django. And it brings me to this page. And let's see, scrolling down here, we can see key management. So here is where we have our key and our secret. So with this, we'd have to go back. Let's look back here real quick. Let's look at how we make a request here to see how it is structured. So to make a request, you simply point it to this URL. Okay. Here's a sample. This tells us, look, it even uses what we're going to be using, our OAuth library. Looks like you have your key first, your API key first, and then your secret key second. So we're pretty much going to be using the sample code that they gave us in order to hit this endpoint and get a response. So I'm going to drag this over on the other screen. We already have our import requests. Let's see. So we're going to do our authentication is equal to this OAuth 1, and it wants your key. Let's see. I gotta pull mine back up. Too many tabs over here. I like my key, so it wants Does it want it in quotes? Yes, for string. Okay. So there is my key. This is my public key. And then the secret key next. And this is particular to this API. Everyone will be different and have a different requirement for how you send your authentication or your keys. So just make sure to read the documentation. But for this one, they had that nice handy page that showed us, how to make requests and some sample code. Most APIs will have that included in their documentation. Thank goodness. Okay, so we have our key and our secret. Let's see. I'm going to follow the README one instead of but it's basically the same thing. Our endpoint, they said we can just point it directly to the URL. And we're going to put in this, we have a query string at the end here. It looks like if you read the documentation, it looks like you can add on a parameter at the end of the URL. It looks probably like an icon search. And then give it a keyword. So we're just going to copy that just to make this all work. And our response is going to be response dot get, not response, oh my gosh, requests, because we're using the request library, get. This is a method that's built into that library. We're going to get the endpoint, and the authentication is going to equal the authentication we have done there. So you could see what this would take, but you can also just use the sample code for how to structure using this library. Again, there's also documentation on this library as well, so you can see how to structure it. But most of the time, you're going to have your endpoint and then your authentication afterwards. Okay, so now when we get that response back, we want to make sure that we can handle that in Django. So we need to do this response.json or response.json. Oh my gosh, no, .json.
Tiffany,
Yes.
just a question. I don't know if it's outside of the scope of things, but is it normal practice to keep the authentication key in the same file, or would it be in encrypted or anything like that?
That is a great question. And we are getting there because no, I don't want this here. If I were to
Okay.
push this to GitHub right now, this would be out there forever for everybody to see. Um, so I don't want this getting out there, which we'll handle that in a second. But for now, I just want to make sure that this is working as intended. So
Okay. Thank you.
Do you have to import JSON to use it?
no, this is from
A
response.
response, got it.
The response library. So it's a method within there. And this, when we hover over it, looks like it's going to return a JSON encoded content of the response.
And response is in the requests library already? Or do we have to import
Or
response?
sorry, not response. Let's see where this is from.
Yep.
This is part of Django. Looks like a part of the requests library. So when you're under all this.
Oh, I see what's going on there. I got confused.
Yeah.
Response is a variable you're making.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
got
okay.
confused.
My bad.
You were right to point that out. It's not, I thought that was the requests. So this is a method that's built into, which it is, from the requests library. So I did that control click to figure out where this is coming from, which you can see is under this requests folder, and it's got its own set of Python stuff attached to it. So But these are all your packages, your libraries that you install in your virtual environment. So if you're ever curious where they go, we can see we have our scopg binary. Here's our requests OAuth library, our REST framework library. So this is where those all go. What was I doing now? Okay, so we're getting the response. And we need to see if this works. So we're going to just do a print. And this is going to be ugly. Okay, so let's save it. This should be in the same one here. I'm just going to call this file. And we can see it worked. It went to this endpoint, got us a response. We've got it in JSON here, and it looks awful. I can't really read it. So they want us to put it in this, use this pp print or this pp, what is it, pprint, import pprint to take a look at this in a better way. And I guess we're going to go only 2 levels deep here. I have not used this particular library or module, so I'm not exactly sure how it works, but we're just going to go off the README. It looks like we're only going to go 2 levels deep, so we get an idea of the response without having to look at the whole thing. Okay, sounds good. So now we're going to, instead of calling print on it, we're going to call this p print. Okay, so now let's try it again. And we can see here, let me do it again. So it's easier to see. Okay, so now we can see the return. It's limited now, so we've only got 2 levels deep. So we have our key here, and then we do have a list here as well. So it looks like whenever we hit this API endpoint, we're going to get a return that has generated at, icons, total, and usage limits. These are the different keys we can access to kind of work with each of these areas here. May not make much sense right now, but it's helpful to look at what your API returns so that you know what you need to focus or grab or what you need to dig into to get the information you need. So now that we know this works, I'm ready to push this up to GitHub, except I don't want to because we have our keys here. So in order to handle this, we don't want these hanging out in this file, which we will put in. We are going to make our own .env file. So this is going to be where you store all of your environment variables that you don't want accessed by the public. And whenever you make one of these, immediately put it in your git ignore, because otherwise there's no point of making it if it's gonna go up to GitHub anyways. So now we can see it's grayed out. It's not going to be pushed up to GitHub. And I can use this file. I'm gonna use this file to store our API keys. Not entirely sure what this environment equals prod is gonna do for us. I meant to look that up. But for now, I'm just gonna move all these over. So I'm gonna take this out. Put it in here. Oh, I have to put it in. And same with the second one here. We'll take it out. These variables can be whatever you want. These are going to be our global environment variables. Standard practice is these are all going to be in uppercase, all uppercase, so that you know they are environment variables that are globally available. Okay, so I have my 2 keys removed from my file and in this folder. Awesome, but how do I use these now within the rest of my project is the question. So what we do for this is we're going to use another library or package, and it is called python-.env. So this is going to be something else we need to install. Again, making sure I'm in my virtual environment still. We're going to pip install python-.env. So this is a package that helps being able to access this environment file within our Django project. And I've already done it because I was messing with this yesterday. So I have this package. To use it, we are going to, let's see, I don't want to print anymore. And that's fine. We should do this to make sure it works. Okay, so to use it, we need to, of course, import some stuff. So from .env, we are going to import this load.env. So this will go through our environment file and then load all the variables as environment variables. So it's a handy function there. And then we also are going to import OS. This is, I'd have to look into this more, what this is, depending on what system we're on. Okay. We've usually seen this with paths and directories, so we'll see. Oh, yep. Okay, so in order to get our files from our environment, or get our variables from the environment file, we are going to have to do a load.env. And that's going to, just calling this by itself, when we hovered over it, we saw it just parses it and loads them all into environment variables. So we don't have to pass anything into this function itself. We're just calling it to go ahead and take all those out of that file and make them environment variables for us. And let's see. Looks like we can print. Let's print. It wants us to print to make sure this is right. Let's see. So this is how you get the one API key. I don't think we called anything that, did we? Let me see. No. Print was our API key. I don't have an API key. Let's try printing one of these. Let's do noun key instead. I don't know whether Amy has that. There we go. So in order to access anything from that file within your Python code, you would do this os.environ and then the name of the key that you're trying to access the value for. So I did noun key and it gave me the value that I had in this file. Do we have any questions so far on what we're doing here? No? Okay, because now we are going to take what we've been doing in the Scratch file and we are going to go into our Pokemon project here. We want to add, let's see, an app. Let's see, add an app to our Pokedex project that displays icons from the noun project. So we're going to add Pokeballs to our Pokedex project. So it says create a Pokeball app, and then we're going to query that third-party API to give us an icon, like we can see in the suggestion already here, that matches whatever ball we're putting into our query. So let's do that. I'm just going to delete this whole file because we're not going to use this. Not rename. Okay. So first things first, I need to create a new application. Well, first I should check. I should have everything, but I'm going to make sure that I have everything installed. I'm pretending like I just pulled this down off GitHub for today's, where we left off the last time. If you pulled this down off GitHub, and this is your first time opening it and getting your virtual environment going, make sure that you have everything under your requirements file installed. Yeah, no such. Oh, it's called requirements. Which I've already done that yesterday, so I have everything installed. Awesome. So now I can work within Django here. So now we need to make a Pokeball app. All right, is that what we're calling it? Pokeball app. So do we remember how to create an app?
Python manage.py, start app, and then the name you want to call it.
Yeah, Pokeball. Non-existing Python module cannot be used as an.
Looks like you already have it.
Oh, I sure do. Did I create this yesterday? And there's nothing in it. Okay, well, I'm gonna name it something different. It looks like it got all weird when I created it yesterday and then I didn't keep it. Wonder. I'm just gonna make it something else. Or maybe, was this here already? It might, I can't remember if it was.
I just had to make mine.
Okay, I was wondering if that was there already or if I had deleted it and it came back, but I guess I didn't delete it. Okay, now that works. I just had to delete that Pokeball app and then redo this start app. Okay, so we've got our Pokeball app. First thing that I want to do, since we're making this all now as a Django REST framework as an API, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, this is interesting, it wants us to do a converter first. So I'm going to make a URL first because for me, it just makes it easier to know that I have an endpoint. I'm going to make a request to. So I'm going to make my urls.py file. And of course, we have to do our imports, which I'm just going to copy and paste. Okay. And, oh, well, that's not here yet. We're going to do that in a second. And so then we have our URL patterns equals square brackets. And the first path that we're going to make is going to be, we're going to get the Pokeball icon. That's what we want to do when we make a request to this URL is we want an icon, an image of a Pokeball. And not only that, we want it to be a specific Pokeball based on the name that we give it. So, they have Pokeball, Great Ball, Ultra Ball, Master Ball. So if I pass in one of those names in my GET request, then I want to get an icon that matches that specific Pokemon. So that is where we will have to do that converter. But for now, we're going to we're going to do a placeholder and say that this is going to be Pokeball. So we're going to hit that endpoint. And, well, no, I got to write the converter first, don't I? No, that's fine. Where does Pokeball? I don't like the order this does this in. Okay. So we need to make, anytime you have a URL endpoint, you're going to have the path that it's going to. And then next up, you're going to have the view, which is what we're going to write here that returns the information. And then you're going to give it a name as the last thing. So we're going to just call this, if they want us to, Pokeball image. And we're going to write that eventually. That's going to be our view that we will call in this at this URL path. And we're going to return that as a view. This is going to be one of the most common ones you use. And we're going to give it a name equals, we're just going to call it Pokeball. Okay, so that is going to be our endpoint. Now I have this view that doesn't exist yet. I'm going to create it. So let me come back here and we are going to call this class Pokeball image, and it is going to inherit from API view. Again, this is probably what you're going to do 99% of the time. We have to do all of our imports here. We're going to do our Django's framework. And this is where we are going to be making that third-party API call, because we want to get the icon in this view here. So we are going to import our requests library as well as our .env, because remember, we don't have those API keys just floating in here. We have them within our env file. Looks like that is okay. We're gonna OS there as well. You just copy and paste. You need these every time you're going to be using this library to make these requests and your environment file. So now I'm going to just copy and paste this as well, but we're going to walk through this, what this is doing. Okay, so here we have a GET request. So anytime anybody comes to this URL, which we're going to add a converter into shortly to be able to take in text, they're going to get, they're going to make a GET request, and it's going to pass in a ball name. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab the URL parameter of the ball. Okay, that's not it. First thing we're going to do is we're going to get our authentication from our environment file. We're going to use our OAuth library. We're going to pull out our noun key and our noun secret key, because this is how this endpoint expects, or this library expects it to work, is we're going to hit this endpoint here, which takes in a ball name, which we're going to do here in a second. And it sends a GET request to the endpoint using that authentication. Once that's done, it'll return a response. We'll turn that response into JSON. And here we're going to return a response, and we're going to call it thumbnail. And it's going to be that response JSON, which when we looked at it earlier, I don't know, I cleared it, didn't I? If you remember, there were several layers to this response. There was like, what was it? Accessed, I think, for when we made the request. Then there was icons, and then there was some other stuff. So we wanted to access the icons key for that response. And then we're just going to take the first one, the first icon here that comes up, and there, this is something you would learn while looking at the documentation or just expanding the response to figure out how to target this information. because if I were to expand it, which let's go ahead and do real quick so that we're not super lost.
So, quick question. So, is this like from the promise objects that we would get in the in the JavaScript?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so here's API Explorer. So this is kind of handy. I like this. A lot of APIs will have either something you can put in Postman, like a bundle, or just a page you can come to. This gives me all the endpoints in this API. I just got to put in my key and whatnot here. So let me pull this over on the other screen while I get this information. Because it seems a little abstract how we're grabbing that response thumbnail. So I want to kind of look into this a bit more. Okay, there's my key. And my secret. Okay. So we were trying to get an icon. So let's play around with this. This was the endpoint we were going to. It was the URL that they gave us in the documentation, and then /v2/icon. And it looks like we could put in a search term, a query parameter, which is what we were doing. If we come back to our view here, we can see we're doing a query here and then a search term. So this essentially will take in the type of Pokeball we're searching for. And we will write that converter in a second to help us do that. So let's see if we just do Pokeball and then try it out. So here's the full response. It's a lot, but I can see that icons is the top of this response, the first key. So in our, let me see if I can pull this up next to it. So here we're taking this response and we're grabbing all the value within icons, which is going to be all this stuff here. And we are taking the first item within this array or list, sorry, because we're in Python, which is going to be whatever is in this curly bracket here to wherever it ends. It's going to be the first item within this list. And then we're going to look for the thumbnail URL within that first list item. So then we can look in these keys here and we can see there's a thumbnail URL here. So what this is doing, this response JSON, is just grabbing this URL and that's it. So that's how you would figure out what you need to write in your response, your return here, what you want to return from your third-party API. I just want a URL image because I'm going to embed that within my front end, maybe in some image tags or something in some HTML. So I just
If
want.
we didn't, quick question, if we didn't have that little API thing that they had on the documentation, that's something we would probably want to use Postman for, right? To send out, get a response back to see what it looks like, all pretty.
Yes, for sure. You can also, let's see if this works. A lot of APIs, you can just hit their endpoint and see the, let's see, JSON within the no, didn't work. Oh, because I have to, requires a secret. That's why. If it doesn't require a key or a secret key or anything, sometimes you can just hit the endpoint in the browser and it'll show you the JSON response. So it's another way you could do it too. But Postman, yes, for sure. Definitely the better option. Okay, so this looks good, although we want to have a ball. We want to be able to pass in a ball in this URL so that this view can take that and work with it. So if we look at the README, it has the converter, which is going to help us with our URL here, make sure that we can take in I guess, the string within the URL and make sure it does the right thing. So I think you learned about this last class period, right? We're going to have a converters file, and I'm just going to copy and paste this, and we're going to talk through it here too. Okay, so with this converter, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that it's only going to be one of these words that can be passed into that URL. Anything else is not going to work. So I just want to be able to take in these 4 types of balls. Otherwise, we're going to get, not the right ball. So this converter I'm going to use in my URL. And when you have a converter, you need to register it first. So we're going to register this converter. We called it ball type converter. Okay. And I am not 100% sure what the Pokeball is for in this. Let's see. Oh, the type name. Okay. So it's going to be a Pokeball. So now we can do our converter here, and well, the URL is going to change actually a little bit. We're going to take this Pokeball converter and have ball. Let's see.
There was a question I asked Julius the other day, and we never got back to it. Are those greater than and less than signs around there? Is that just a syntax for the converter library, or because that's new
Yeah,
syntax?
that's what I'd assume. I think it's let's look at it.
Because the way I'm looking at it, it's like Pokeball is the name of the converter, and then you're giving it a variable to use with whatever's passed in, a ball, right?
Yeah, that's what I would assume. It's part of the converter. I could look into it, but we're taking this Pokeball and giving it ball. That's weird. But then we come over here that nope, the ball comes over here into this GET request because it's expecting ball. But yeah, I have not seen a lot of converters. But everyone I've seen does it this way with this. It's kind of like when it's like your insert your parameter here or something, that sort of syntax. We can find out real quick though. I'm gonna do this whole thing here. And honestly, I'm just gonna go to ChatGPT and ask, is this let's see, is this standard converter syntax? Okay, so this is not giving me what I wanted. It looks like it might be because it's a custom. Yes, so it just says this is path converter syntax. So there we go. It's just the way it is. I don't know why. That's how it expects it. And we're giving it I guess the variable the string name we've identified here, and then this ball is going to be what is passed into the view here. That's the name of the parameter in the view. So now I should be able to just type in, like, we'll go to this URL and type in master ball. And it should give me should come here and just plug master ball in at the end of this get request. Okay, so we're gonna test that though. We're not gonna trust that it should do that. We're gonna do our tests. Have I done everything I've needed to do in order to start testing this? So I made my URL within the Pokeball app. I've got a view that's associated with it so it can handle data. I have my converter helping it as
Do
well.
we still have to add it to the settings.py even though we don't have models or anything?
Yes, yes, we do. So that is the next thing you got to do is you got to connect it to your Pokédex project. Or first thing. We probably should have done it in the beginning. So we do need to add it here with all the other applications because then it can be used within this project. It doesn't matter if we don't have a model associated with it. So we're going to call this Pokeball app. Okay, was this all then that I've got to do within my project? Are we good now, or was there something else I should
There's
probably
the
do?
URLs.
Yes, got
That's
to
like
add
the
it also.
beginning, right? The beginning of the URL.
Correct. So what you learned was this yesterday or Monday? Was this is going to be the start of the path. And typically, as we've seen in quite a few of the APIs we've done, you have API slash the version number and then whatever endpoint you want it to go to. So we are going to call this path. We're following standard practice here and calling it API V1. And this one's going to be Pokeballs. Okay. And make sure you add this at the end. Otherwise it won't let you add anything on after it. So we're going to include all the URLs then from our Pokeball app. So now this will, what am I missing?
I don't think you need a parentheses after API V1 Pokeballs slash.
Oh, yep. I ended it too early because we want it all one path. And then, so anytime we go here, we can tag on anything at the end of it that's within here. So we would do, our URL would be the API V1 Pokeballs and then the name of the Pokeball that we want to get back. Okay, are we following along so far? So I think we're good now to start testing it because we've got that app in our project. We've added our URL path so that we can actually hit this endpoint. And then we've also got, oh, save it. We've also got our converter and our view on the back end here to handle that request. So now I want to make a test file. So let's do that up here real quick. Tests. Oh, I guess we're going to call it test API. No. Where is this putting it? Oh, we have this test. Okay, I see. Okay, so we're going to come in here then and add our test API. So now when testing this, I don't know if you saw or caught in the documentation that I have a limit. I can only call this 5,000 times a month, which seems like a lot, but if you have an application that's auto-refreshing or just making a whole bunch of API calls every few seconds, that can fill up really fast. So when I'm testing, I don't actually want to hit this endpoint because it's going to use against my limit. So it's a good idea when testing APIs to just mock up an API call and handle it that way. So that's what they've done in the README is we are using this mock object. Did you do that in other ones? I haven't seen. Looks like maybe no. We're gonna do this mock object. Which I honestly would have to look more into this to see what it's doing, but we're basically going to do a fake API call. And then we are going to, let's see, quest.get mock return. So we're mocking a good return, like a status code of 200 is a good return from this. And we're going to return back an icons and then the thumbnail URL, which we've given up here. We've said that the ball is going to be Pokeball and the thumbnail URL is going to be just this random example image. So when we do this mock return value equals mock object, it looks like it will, let me see what this does, return this JSON is what I'm assuming. I'd have to look into it, but it looks like it'll return this JSON result. Get reverse Pokeball, arguments equals ball. Then we're going to do the result.content. Ooh, okay. I'd have to look more into this to see exactly what it's doing. But if you're testing in an API, I would try to set it up similar to this. So if you're wanting, let's see, this equals the same thing we're getting back from our view up here. We are getting a thumbnail and then a certain response URL. So this is also has a thumbnail URL, thumbnail. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. We can come back and look at these later if we want to. There it is. I kind of wanted to see where this came from.
Tiffany,
Yes.
can you explain what mocking is? What it represents?
So mocking is giving basically sample values for every step of this API call. So instead of doing a real API call, we are just faking it and we're saying, I'm going to give it this and it will return this. So usually you would create a return that is identical to what you're expecting. I don't write too many of these types of tests though. So I would have to, like I said, I'd have to look into this a bit more. But typically when mocking, it would, let's see, I'm trying to see if the README even says it. It just does an example call, I guess, and returns back an example return response. That's the best I can explain it right now. I'll have to find a better explanation of that. This mock object. So Oh. Hmm. So it looks like we're just bypassing, we're bypassing our API call and having this be the return value. So that way we don't actually hit our endpoint. Okay, well, I will definitely find some documentation or something or a better description of this. You can read it when you click on the mock unit test mock. You can read all about this. It creates a new mock object, takes arguments that specify behavior of it, whole bunch of stuff you can do with it. So yeah, you can spend some time reading some documentation and learning how this mock works. I see Mike over there laughing. um,
It's yeah, because I remember like with the databases and stuff, you didn't want to make real calls to the database and you needed to mock stuff and so what I would do is just set up, I would hard code all the stuff. And when I actually got to learn what mocking is, I'm like, wait a minute. It's the same thing that I was already doing, but there is something unique with that mocking. I don't know what it all is because I didn't dive in it, but yeah, it's mocking.
yeah, I feel like I don't want to say anything that's not true. So I don't just speculating here, but I feel like it sets up an environment separate and let's see. Yeah, no, I'm not even gonna take a stab at it. We're gonna do some research into that, hopefully. Um, okay, so we got this test up that supposedly is going to test our endpoint. So it's going to, let's see, get our API client. Is that what we named it here? No. Oh, this is just from the test cases, it looks like. And then we're going to test that Pokeball view. Okay, well, we will go ahead and test this. Okay, so if I run this right now, what do we think is going to happen? Right now.
If you run it, I think it's going to return what has been defined as the ball and the thumbnail. I think it's going to our loaded whatever it is, but it's going to return that. Uh, yeah.
Oh, how do we run just this folder? If I do tests, is it gonna run everything? Oh, there's no test there anymore. Okay, good. So we must have put them all down here. Okay, let's try. Okay, so found 0 tests. Why? How do I run this?
I think it's test. I think you have it's test and then test again. I
Oh,
think they
yeah,
are two things.
I see it. I went to yesterday's lecture. Okay. Test tests. Okay. Oh no, what's happening here? Do we know what's going on? Why am I getting all sorts of errors?
Do you have Docker compose up going? Was it Docker compose up dash D? Or
Nope. I don't. So that is one of them. These tests will not work because I don't have Docker Compose going. However, that's okay. I don't want to test those now. So I'm going to move this. I just want to test this one. Let's put it in here. Because Docker Compose is giving me the database. And do I need a database with this particular application?
No, because you're just hitting that mock, right? There's no database there. It's going to give you a 200
Yes.
with that.
And even further, we don't even have a model here, right? Because with this one, we're not storing information in our database. We're just making an API call to the outside world. So this application, this Pokeball application, doesn't need a database to work. The rest of it does for sure, but for now, I'm just wanting to test this call specifically. So we are going to try this again. And this time I'm going to test, and I think I do Pokeball, and I still get an error. What's going on now? So it says, is the server running on the host and accepting connections? What did I not do here after I added this?
Try hitting the actual file itself. So the same command you did, but do pokeball.test.py. Or yeah, you're just calling it test.py.
So this
Or
should
tests.
hit that one specifically.
Even if you're just calling the folder itself.
Because it's looking for that test file.
Okay.
There's one important step I didn't do. When we're working in Django REST framework, we're creating our own API, right? So where is my API right now? Is it working?
Did you configure your settings?
I did. I'll go ahead and let y'all know what we need to do. We need to run our server. Nothing's running right now. So we've created our backend, but unless if you do Django run server, or what is it, Python manage.py run server, this port is not listening for, or these endpoints are not listening for requests. They're just sitting here as files. So we're going to do Python, let me clear this. And we can kind of get that by seeing, is the server running on the host and accepting connections? So no, it is not, because we haven't done our Python manage.py run server. What? What is it? That's not it. What is this? I thought it was Python manage.py run server.
Are you in the, what directory are you in? Are you in the root for this project? Okay.
Yeah. Is that the command? I think that's the command. Going back to look.
Yeah, I do believe it is just Python manage.py run server.
Yep, it is. Okay. Maybe something's weird with the. Okay. What are we got going on here in connections? I caught Postgres. This is weird. Should not be doing this. The Django REST framework. Well, let's go ahead and not Control C. Something else running, I wonder? Yeah, I'm gonna hit my local host real quick and make sure nothing else is up. Shouldn't be. Okay, no, it's not. Why are you not? Let's see. Save. I'm gonna save everything again, just to make sure, and then we're just gonna kick up the database just in case. I guess we'll do some Docker Compose Hub. Even though I don't think that's the problem. Yeah. I guess it was the problem. I wonder.
It needs to hit a container of some sort for it to work.
So I didn't need to do this yesterday. I did not have my Docker image running yesterday. I can't tell you why. I'm wondering if it's just because of this right here, because that's the only thing different that I can think of. I did not have my test API in this folder down here. I had it within the, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. Oh well, but it works. Now we're running and we're listening at our local host and waiting for our endpoint to be hit. So now we should be able to go ahead and run our test file. Might as run, well, I don't have anything up in the others, I think. Maybe I do. Let's go ahead and just run. Let's see. Manage.py. Tests. Is that it? I need cheat sheets all the time. Yes. Test. Oh, wait, it's tests. Okay. Yeah, no, I don't want to run those because I don't want to. I didn't create the database or make migrations or anything. So we're going to clear this and we're just going to go back up to our. Ball. Okay.
So the purpose of the mock, Tiffany, is more so to test the method that is using it then. It is more so to test the method that will actually be receiving the data. Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's testing this, basically this GET request to make sure that when we pass in ball, it gives us the return structured like how we want it to. Which is just going to be a JSON. But we can see it worked, which is awesome. So our API call should be good to go. The test part here is a little hazy, and we'll do some more looking into this after the video is up. But how do we feel about, we've touched on the URL patterns the other day. So this should be okay with the converter. But how do we feel using in your view, instead of doing your query into a database, you're using this OAuth library to hit an endpoint and get a response. You can set it up like this every time. Your authentication is there. Your endpoint is here. Your response is going to be request.get that endpoint and any authentication. So you can set it up. And then of course the JSON at the end, converted to JSON. Should be able to follow this roughly. Anytime you make a third-party request, of course, it might change slightly depending on how the authentication works. But do we have any questions on injecting our third-party API call into our backend? No questions?
Well, I have one. I can't remember what file it was in, but you were making the endpoint, and then there was a comma, and there was another string. Um, I can't. I think that string was telling which app to call. I can't. Yes, this here.
So this is our project URLs, and with these paths, this is basically going to be the first half of the path for our endpoints. So we follow a particular standard here with API/version whatever, and then the name that's going to preface, and then this include goes over to this app, looks in the URLs, and just appends those onto the end of this path. So for this Pokemon app, let's see. Let's go to our Pokemon app. It looks in the URLs file. Go to the side. And it is going to take all the paths in here and stick them on the end of this path. So these ones will all start with this API v1 Pokemon, and then this is just blank. This means there's nothing in this path. So it would simply hitting API v1 Pokemon should give you all Pokemon. And then going to API v1 Pokemon and giving it a string or an integer will give you that specific Pokemon.
So how does it know? Because you just said that it includes all the paths that are in the URL. Wait a minute. Wait, never mind. Wait a minute. Never mind. Those are two different apps. Never mind. I thought you were saying that it would take all the paths and use them up in both of them, but never mind. I understand now.
Yep, just the app we've defined here. So
Yeah.
that's why we have because we have three different apps. So we want to make sure that all of those URLs are pulled in. Any other questions on anything from today?
So when it's appending those paths, so if we only have two URLs in the project urls.py, if we have two paths in there, I know you said it's going to append both of those paths to that V1, let's just say V1 Pokemon paths, but wouldn't that make it not go there? What I was thinking was that it would have two two paths in a sense, like eight the API v1 Pokemon, and then that one URL that gets appended, and then another one that would say API v1 Pokemon, and then that other path. But you're saying it's taking both of those paths and it's putting them on that one string.
I mean, it would still be separate, but what this is doing is giving access to both of these paths.
Okay. Okay.
So it's just plugging this on the front of each of these.
Okay. So it's not the other way. Okay.
Yeah, that's easier to understand this way. Yeah.
So, got it.
So we can actually, I'm gonna stop recording in a second here because when we go over our assignment today, I have a couple other things to show. Okay, any other questions about this though before I end the recording? Most important parts again are adding in that URL, which you should kind of know how to do. We have that converter, which is helping us keep our string input because we should have learned yesterday, you can have a string input here in your path. This converter that we made was making it so it can only be these string matches that are put in to our path in order to get a result. And then that URL, that our endpoint, once we hit this endpoint, we'll go to this view, which we've identified here. And we've only identified it to be a GET request. So when you hit that endpoint, it should be a GET from this third-party API. All right. I will stop recording. If I can find, where is my record button here? Okay.